I never believed in the supernatural until the night when I discovered my reflection wasn't merely a reflection. It was a Friday evening and I had just returned to my small apartment in a rundown Chicago neighborhood after a grueling week at work. I had moved here to escape the noise of my old life, seeking peace and a fresh start. The peeling paint and flickering lights didn't bother me. There was a certain charm in decay. But tonight, as I settled into my routine, the air felt thick, almost electric, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It began with a low hum, a sound that seemed to resonate from the very walls. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the old building settling. I turned on the TV, hoping the familiar noise would drown out the unsettling atmosphere. As the images flickered across the screen, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow moving at the edge of my vision. When I turned to look, there was nothing but the dull reflection of my living room in the tarnished mirror above my sofa. I tried to dismiss it, but that feeling of being watched returned, more insistent this time, clawing at my mind. I moved to the bathroom, the fluorescent light casting a harsh glow that made the room feel even smaller. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to shake off the growing unease. The hum intensified, vibrating through the cracked tiles and making the hairs on my arms stand on end. I stared into the mirror, my face pale and drawn, the tired lines around my eyes deepening as the reflection stared back. That's when I noticed it. A flicker of movement, almost imperceptible, a shadow just behind my own. I blinked, but it was still there, a twisted version of myself. It smirked. I stumbled back, heart racing. The reflection was still smiling, its eyes glinting with a knowing malice that made my stomach churn. I shook my head, convinced I was losing my mind. I splashed more water on my face, but when I looked up again, it was gone. The bathroom felt oppressive, the air thick with something sour and metallic. I turned and fled, the hum now a deafening roar in my ears. Back in my living room, I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media, but my fingers felt numb. I couldn't shake the image of my reflection from my mind. I could still see that cruel smirk, the way my own face had betrayed me. As the evening wore on, I decided to make some tea, hoping the warm liquid would soothe my fraying nerves. The kettle whistled, filling the room with a comforting sound, but just as I poured, the lights flickered and dimmed. I hesitated, the kettle trembling in my hands as shadows danced at the edges of my vision. That's when I heard it, a soft scratch against the wall, just above the sink. I froze, the steam rising in tendrils from the cup, filling my lungs with a scent that suddenly turned rancid, like rotting leaves. I set the kettle down, my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I stepped closer to the sound. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like fingers dragging along the plaster, and that feeling of being watched returned, stronger, more invasive. I peered into the dimness, searching for the source. My breath caught as I saw my reflection again, this time in the kitchen window. It stood behind me, grinning wider, its eyes dark voids. I turned to confront it, but the space was empty. The kettle hissed, boiling again, but the sound was drowned out by a thunderous roar in my chest. I stumbled back, bumping into the table, and at that moment I realized the scratching had stopped. An oppressive silence filled the room, thick and suffocating, as if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Then I felt it, a cold breeze, seeping through the walls, wrapping around me like an icy hand. My skin prickled, and I glanced back at the window. My reflection was still there, a mirror image fixed in place. But I felt a pull toward it, an irresistible urge to step closer. I shook my head violently, trying to resist, but it was too strong. I could feel my breath quickening, my heart racing as I stumbled toward the glass. The reflection's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too pointed. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. I gasped, the world around me dissolving into shadows. In that pitch-black moment, I felt a surge of cold wrap around my throat like a vice. I reached up instinctively, but there was nothing there, just the weight of darkness pressing down on me. I closed my eyes, and in that instant, the humming returned, louder than ever, filling my head with whispers. When I opened my eyes again, the lights had returned, but the reflection was gone. I stood alone in the kitchen, heart racing, breaths coming in shaky gasps, the air now stale and heavy. I blinked, confusion washing over me, but something felt off. The room was too quiet, too still. I glanced back at the window, and my heart sunk. There it was again, the reflection, but this time it was me standing there, eyes wide open with terror. A twisted version of my own fear reflected back at me. And then I heard it. Distant laughter, echoing through the darkness, as if something had awakened, something that was waiting for me. I turned to escape, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. I pounded against it, my screams swallowed by laughter that grew louder. The last thing I remember was the reflection in the window, grinning wider than ever, and I realized with chilling certainty that it was no longer just a reflection. It was something else, entirely, and it was coming for me.
I never imagined the darkness within my own home could surpass anything I faced outside. As a freelance graphic designer, living alone in a small Nashville apartment, my walls were plastered with my vibrant art, a stark contrast to the shadows that lingered after sunset. My days blended into long hours filled with work, caffeine, and occasional family calls. Yet at night, when the world outside faded into silence, I often felt haunted by whispers echoing through the empty space. It all began on a stormy October evening. The wind howled, rattling the windows, as raindrops pelted the glass like tiny fists. I was hunched over my computer, the screen's glow illuminating my weary face, when I heard it. A soft, indistinguishable scratching from the wall behind my desk. My heart raced, and I hesitated, staring at the wall as if it might reveal its secrets. I convinced myself it was just the wind or a branch scraping against the building. Yet the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Finally, I stood up, took a deep breath, and approached the wall. As I pressed my ear against the cool surface, the sound transformed into a faint, rhythmic tapping, as if something was trying to communicate with me. My pulse quickened, and an inexplicable chill spread across my skin. The air felt thick and oppressive, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I backed away, shaking my head, willing myself to dismiss it. That night, I barely slept. The tapping continued, a maddening metronome echoing in my mind. When morning arrived, I tried to shake it off and filled my day with work, but the gnawing unease clung to me like a shadow. I called my sister, hoping for a distraction. She answered warmly, but even her laughter couldn't lift the weight on my chest. As night fell again, I braced myself for the return of the tapping. It began as darkness enveloped the apartment, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent chills crawling up my spine. This time, I grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting through the heavy air. I aimed it at the wall, illuminating chipped paint and old plaster, but there was nothing there. I felt foolish, yet the sound was maddening. With each tap, a sickening feeling twisted in my stomach, as if something was clawing its way toward me from the other side. Desperately, I tried to drown it out with music, but even that felt inadequate. I closed my eyes, willing it all to go away, but the tapping intensified, morphing into a low growl, a guttural sound that reverberated through the walls and rattled my bones. I jumped, adrenaline flooding my veins. I decided to investigate. I moved to where the noise seemed the loudest, breath quickening as I pressed my ear against the wall again. The tapping transformed into something deeper, almost like a whisper, a voice, indistinct yet chilling, weaving through the air. My stomach churned and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. "Get out," it seemed to say, muddled and slurred. I stumbled back, fear coursing through me like venom. That night, as I tried to sleep, I felt a presence, a weight settling over the bed. My skin crawled with the sensation of being watched. I opened my eyes and thought I saw a figure standing in the corner, darker than the surrounding shadows. I blinked, and it was gone. Nausea twisted my insides, and I clamped my eyes shut, praying for morning. The next day I sought help, calling local paranormal groups. They listened intently to my experience, offering to investigate. My landlord dismissed my fears with a chuckle, but the tapping didn't cease. It grew more aggressive, sounding as if whatever was on the other side needed me to listen. When the team arrived, they brought gadgets, EMF detectors, voice recorders, and even a spirit box. I felt absurd standing there with strangers armed against the unknown, but I craved answers. As night descended, we set up equipment, and I waited with bated breath. The tapping began almost immediately, reverberating through the air, mixing with the palpable tension in the room. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The spirit box crackled to life, merging static with the low growl I had come to know. "Leave," it hissed. The investigators exchanged nervous glances, and a sense of dread washed over me. Then, the tapping escalated into frantic pounding, a furious attempt to break through the wall. The investigators scrambled, shouting questions into the darkness, but chaos consumed us. Panic surged within me, and without thinking, I rushed to the wall, pounding my fists against it, desperate to understand. In that moment, the pounding ceased. An eerie silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. The spirit box fell silent too, leaving only the echo of my breath in the stillness. I stepped back, heart racing, and noticed something was off. The air had turned cold, a bitter chill seeping into my bones. Then, as if in response to my fear, I heard it, a soft whisper, clear and chilling. "You invited me in." I stumbled back, the room spinning. The investigators were silent, their faces pale. I realized I was no longer just frightened. I was trapped. The walls felt alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that seeped into my being. Days later, my apartment remained untouched, my belongings scattered, my digital footprint erased as if I had lived a ghost's life. I never returned, leaving behind the vibrant colors of my art, the laughter of friends, and the whispers that echoed in a haunting symphony, an invitation I never meant to extend. The tapping continues to resonate in my nightmares, a relentless reminder that some walls hold secrets too dark to uncover, and some presences are better left alone.
I never believed the old house at the end of Maple Street was anything more than a local ghost story, until one night it became my living nightmare. It was a dreary autumn evening when I, a 28-year-old freelance writer, sought inspiration for my next piece. The air was thick with the smell of wet leaves and decaying wood as I approached the vacant house. A dim light flickered in one of the dusty windows, and against my better judgment, curiosity pulled me inside. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the musty smell engulfed me like a wet blanket. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each sound echoing in the stillness as if the house itself were alive and watching. My throat tightened, a mix of excitement and anxiety gnawing at me. I should have turned around, but the flickering light lured me deeper, promising secrets that begged to be uncovered. As I moved through the darkened rooms, I felt a palpable heaviness in the air, like an unseen weight pressing down on my chest. Shadows danced in the corners, shifting when I turned to look, but I chalked it up to my imagination, fueled by the eerie ambiance. I found myself in what appeared to be a parlor, with faded wallpaper peeling away, revealing the wood beneath like layers of skin stripped bare. The light came from a single lamp, its bulb flickering sporadically, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach for me. Then I heard it, a low, guttural whisper, almost like a distant conversation echoing through the room. The sound sent chills racing down my spine, a mix of dread and disbelief. I strained to catch the words, but could only decipher fragmented phrases. "Come closer, it's waiting." My heart pounded like a war drum as I dared to step closer to the source. The air grew colder, wrapping around me like a snake coiling for a strike. As I approached the lamp, the whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of pleading voices.
I felt the tugging sensation at my mind, pulling me towards something unseen. My skin prickled, a wave of nausea washing over me as I glanced into the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. My reflection stared back, but it looked different, hollow, as if someone else's eyes were peering through. There was something behind me, a dark shape barely visible in the dim light. Spinning around, I found nothing but the heavy silence of the empty room. The air thickened with a metallic scent, a hint of decay that made my stomach churn. I turned back to the mirror, and this time, the reflection smiled. I stumbled back, heart racing and palms sweaty. I had to get out, but my feet felt rooted to the ground as if the house itself were pulling me deeper into its grasp. Suddenly, the lights flickered wildly, illuminating the space in quick bursts. Shadows leapt and lunged, and I felt something brush against my arm, a cold, clammy hand that sent icy terror coursing through me. I whirled around, panic rising as I faced the darkness. The whispers crescendoed into a scream that vibrated through the walls, reverberating in my bones. My pulse raced, pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. I turned to flee, but the air thickened, a wall of pressure pushing back against me. My breath came in ragged gasps, and the biting chill of the room seeped into my skin. As I stumbled toward the door, I could hear the faintest sound of laughter, soft, mocking, like the gentle tinkling of a wind chime that quickly turned sinister. I pressed against the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if the house itself was keeping me inside, feeding off my fear. The laughter morphed into sobs, echoing all around me. A child's cry pierced the air, raw and heart-wrenching. "Help me!" it pleaded, but the voice twisted into something grotesque, a chorus of distorted wails. I clawed at the door, desperation clawing at my throat, but it remained stubbornly shut, as if it had a will of its own. Just when I thought I would be lost to this nightmare forever, the door suddenly swung open, spilling in blinding light from the outside. Without a second thought, I barreled through, tumbling onto the porch and gasping for breath. I turned back, heart pounding, expecting to see the monstrous darkness spill out after me, but the house stood silent, its windows dark, as if nothing had ever stirred within. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, the engine roaring to life beneath my trembling hands. As I sped away, I glanced back in the rearview mirror. The house loomed behind me, but something changed. The light in the window was back on, flickering once more, a welcome mat for the next lost soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't escaped. I had merely been given a temporary reprieve. The whispers would find me again, I was sure of it. Even now they curled through my mind like smoke, promising that this was far from over.
I never imagined my quiet hometown could conceal such darkness until the night I uncovered what lay buried beneath its surface. Growing up in a small, insular community in rural Pennsylvania where everyone knew each other and secrets were whispered but never acknowledged, my life was ordinary. School, friends, late-night gaming sessions, until I decided to explore the old mining site just outside of town. Abandoned for decades, its entrance was swallowed by weeds and neglect, yet rumors lingered like ghosts, haunting us with tales of lost souls and terrible accidents. The evening was unseasonably warm for late October, a thin veil of mist coiling around the ground, wrapping the world in an eerie embrace. My friends dared me to go inside to prove my bravery. Armed with a flashlight and a reckless sense of adventure, I ventured alone, leaving their laughter behind. The air grew heavier as I approached the entrance, a gaping maw in the earth that seemed to breathe in the cool night air. I can still recall the metallic scent of rust as I stepped through the crumbling archway, my heart pounding, echoing against the damp stone walls. Inside, darkness enveloped me, each breath thick with decay. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam slicing through the blackness, revealing a wall slick with moss. Shadows danced, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to leer back at me. I hesitated, unease creeping up my spine, but the thrill of exploration pushed me deeper. The further I went, the more I sensed an unsettling presence, as if invisible eyes were watching my every move. I stumbled upon an old wooden cart, rusted and covered in dust. As I approached, a chill coursed through me, and I noticed something glimmering beneath the grime, a small, tarnished locket. I picked it up, its metal cold against my palm. A faint whisper echoed through the cavern, sending tremors through my body. It was barely audible, like the wind carrying secrets. "Leave it!" The walls felt alive, the air vibrating with unspoken warnings, but curiosity propelled me forward. Suddenly, I heard a soft scuttling sound behind me, like tiny claws clinging to stone. My heart raced as I whipped around, illuminating the path I had come from. Nothing, just shadows. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself it was my imagination, but deep down I knew better. The atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a foul scent, like burnt hair and mold. I pressed on, my instincts screaming at me, but curiosity had already sunk its teeth into me. Deeper into the mine, the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath mingle with the thick darkness. I came upon a chamber, its ceiling so high that my flashlight couldn't penetrate the shadows. Scattered across the floor were relics of lives once lived, clothing, broken dolls, and assorted trinkets all covered in dust. The whispers intensified, a chorus of desperate voices pleading to be heard. A wave of nausea washed over me, the air heavy with sorrow. Then I noticed something odd. At the far wall was a large crude drawing etched into the stone. It depicted a figure with elongated arms and a twisted face of torment. I stepped closer, entranced, as dread washed over me. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of anguish. My pulse quickened, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I backed away slowly, feeling a creeping dread that something was behind me. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of soft crying. It was faint but unmistakably real, as though a child was trapped, calling for help. My heart dropped, and I spun around, shining my light frantically. The beam caught a fleeting glimpse of something small and shadowy darting between the rocks. Adrenaline surged through me as I fought the urge to run. The crying intensified, morphing into a wail that clawed at my insides. I bolted toward the exit, panic driving me, but it felt as if the mine had shifted, walls closing in around me. I could hear the cries echoing behind me, a symphony of desperation fueling my flight. Each step reverberated through the damp earth, and I could taste the iron tang of fear. I reached the entrance, collapsing against the cool stone, gasping for breath. I turned back, the mine looming behind me, a dark sentinel of secrets. Outside, the night was deceptively calm. The mist had thickened, swirling like a living entity. I stumbled home, my mind racing, replaying the whispers, the cries, the shadow. I never spoke of that night to my friends, and they never asked. But I felt the weight of those voices, a constant reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. I still see the locket sometimes, tucked away in a drawer, and I can hear their whispers in the silence of the night, calling me back to that darkness, begging me to return.